I call to order the study session for June 21st, 2022. I'm not George Pankington. George is at a meeting, I think a mayor's meeting somewhere, right?
Yeah, or a defense meeting, I think.
Yep, and I drew the short straw, so you're gonna have to put up with me tonight. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Allen?
Present.
Commissioner Norwood?
Here.
Commissioner Siragusa?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts? Here. Commissioner Orr?
Here.
Mayor Pinkerton is not in, and Mayor Pro Tem Stallings?
Here.
All right.
Item 2, do any of the commissioners have any issues on the regular agenda that you want, the regular session agenda that you want to talk about? Hearing none, we'll move to item 3, and the first is our legislative update from Rogan.
All right,
Welcome.
thanks. Glad to be here. I'm going to try to roll through these as quick as I can. I could go on for an hour. Every time I put these together, there's a lot going on. For the month of June, it's the busiest I've ever seen for state legislature to deal with. Usually the month of June is supposed to be quiet time. That is not the case. But the regular session did end at the end of May, as it always is supposed to, and record budget. This is a slide taken from the Oklahoma Policy Institute on just the history of budgets for the last several years. You can see we hit the $10 billion mark. Highest we've ever had. Those little blue lines at the top are the years they had to dig into the savings accounts, and there was maybe 5 years ago they had to raise some taxes to find some revenue, but a nice historical perspective shows that we're pretty healthy right now. A few of the budget items that you'll see on campaign literature throughout the year. I think the governor, this is his biggest one, that's increased the state savings account, the rainy day funds and different revolving accounts to $2.6 billion, again, largest in history. Education received a little bit of an increase. Of course, education is the largest part of the budget, $4.2 billion. Economic development was probably the biggest winner this year. If you recall, during the middle of the session, we did a big incentive plan for what they call Project Ocean over in Mays County, other side of Tulsa, trying to lure a battery manufacturer. They couldn't make it public, that's why they called it Project Ocean. But that was about a $750 million program incentive to lure them here. It was basically beefing up the quality jobs program, so it pretty much funds itself. What made it unique is they pre-funded the program to make sure to show good faith that the money was there to handle the business. Along with that came the PrEP fund for economic development, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Law enforcement, pay raise for our state troopers, well-deserved, 30% pay raise. OSBI agents got a pay raise as well. It cost the state about $5.3 to do that. So those are things that you're going to see in the campaigns. And this is a quick slide to show, people always ask, well, where's the biggest part of the budget? Again, education. Next in line is health and social services, and then human services and public safety. Those are the biggest pieces of the pie. It's where a lot of that goes. So when you can throw around $10 billion, but at the end of the day, everything else is very competitive when you try to get money for roads and local issues and economic development incentives. So it becomes pretty competitive real quick. Okay, a few of the success stories for municipal government. First, let me say that there was a ton of legislation that died, as it should. There's a lot of preemption laws out there that were trying to be created where the state has authority over city issues, and we fight that every year. OML did a great job of organizing all the city lobbyists and pulling us in on meetings that they were having with legislators, and they did a fantastic job. Senate Bill 970 requires that personal information collected by agencies from individuals as part of a licensing be kept confidential, not subject to open records. Of course, cities are involved in that issue. Medical marijuana It was a huge huge issue at the Capitol this year, but as far as cities are concerned, they were involved in this one, and increases penalties on improper sale, transfer, or purchase of medical marijuana. In addition to that, I probably could have created another whole set of slides on this, but some of the notables in the medical marijuana category, there were about 20 bills passed in this category at the state legislature this year. Some of the top ones were the Marijuana Commission. Medical Marijuana Commission is now a standalone agency, as it should be. They are well-funded with their own fees. Last year, they got an additional 65 employees to help with inspections and things of that nature. There is now a 2-year moratorium on medical marijuana licenses and permits. So the legislature tapped the brakes on the industry. Let government kind of catch up to monitoring it. Also, they created a tiered system on the licensing so that it has to do, your fees are in connection with the size of the canopy. So this kind of helps with the inspections of the different facilities to know how big the canopy is going to be before they go out there. It also helps the state monitor how much is being grown in the state by making sure that there's good measurements and a tiered license system on the canopy. So there's a lot going on. This was probably the biggest issues that legislature was dealing with.
So when you say licenses, you don't mean individuals, you're talking about the growers?
Yeah, the
or
growers.
The dispensaries as well?
Right.
No, just
I
the
think
growers?
this was on the grow houses with the tiered system, so that their permits reflected the size of the canopy. And I want to say there's somewhere between 3 and 5 different tiers in that category. But it helps inspectors to know that, oh, I'm going out to a tier 5 facility. It's probably going to take most of the day to inspect. If it were a tier 1, smaller, they can maybe put a few of those in one day. And it just helps with a little bit of time management there. But a lot going on. There's been a lot of illegal activity, obviously, in the category, and a lot of, well, enough said. I mean, this is going to be, how long has it been since we've had prohibition? We've had alcohol laws dealt with for the last 80 years. This is not going to go away. This is one that I'm particularly proud of. I had a lot of involvement in this issue, and that's public transit funding. For the first time in 17 years, public transit was able to get an additional $5 million of funding. This funding will be used to match federal grants. Public transit provides over 10 million rides in all 77 counties every year. The association, the Transit Association, and in conjunction with the Department of Transportation, which handles the revolving account, determined that we were leaving over $10 million of federal funds on the table because we didn't have a large enough matching account to go after that funding. Throw in the fact that fuel prices are going up, the cost of the vehicles are going up, the wait time to get the vehicles has stretched out. A lot of transit facilities are having to stretch the cost, make the vehicles last another 100,000 miles or 2. Parts are increasing, and so the legislature met the need there. And hopefully we can do a repeat on this revolving account. They kind of look at it as a one-time appropriation, and so hopefully we can keep some good records across the state and do it again next year. We'll see. But the wait time on those vehicles used to be about a month or 2. Now it's turned into a year or 2 to get a vehicle. And I'm sure you've felt the pain there. Okay, economic development legislation. As I said earlier, this was one of the categories of a big win. The battery facility, Project Ocean, over there in eastern Oklahoma, was called the LEAD Act, Beefing Up the Quality Jobs Program, House Bill 4455. And then along came the PrEP Fund. I don't know the acronym for the PrEP Fund, but it's a better acronym than every place else but Mays County. It was essentially what it was. The legislators were crying out, where's my incentive? Where's our money for our industrial parks? And the governor actually helped promote this, and they dumped $250 million into the PREP fund to go after future economic mega projects. That's kind of the new era of economic development, is the mega project, a new buzzword. And the guidelines are currently being developed on this, and they're going to pass the guidelines hopefully in a special session. I'll get to that here in a little bit as to which special session. I talked to the House author, and he has his guidelines all set up from this thing. The Senate, we don't know what their guidelines are yet. Hopefully they get together and work that out. But there will be a local match involved, whether it's monetary or in kind, in the way of streets, roads. It's geared towards developing industrial parks, air parks, and ports. So I know that our local economic development team is watching this, as all the economic developers are across the state, on how these funds can be used. We hope that this could be a repeat account that could get funded, but we got to get it off to a good start first. House Bill 4085 creates the Oklahoma Rural Jobs Act. This is a program that's modeled after a Georgia program. They call it a self-funding program. The guidelines on it have yet to be written on how they're going to administer it through Department of Commerce, but it's geared towards greater than 250 employees, $100 million investment, counties less than 75,000 population, which is us. Principal business operations in the state, and up to a $15 million in tax credits can be claimed. So this is a tax credit program, essentially, and there's going to be a mechanism by which to grade to make sure you're qualified for these tax credits. House Bill 3081, Strategic Industrial Development Enhancement Tax Credit, another tax credit program. And it got me to thinking that the tax credits are kind of making a comeback. For a long time, tax credits were a bad word at the state legislature, starting about 10 years ago. And they just went through this about 5-7 years worth of just, especially during our shortfall years, getting rid of a lot of tax credits. So in the way of economic development, the tax credits are making a comeback. And here's another one that is geared towards industrial parks, economic development zones, ports with a population of less than 100,000, which would be us. And there's some qualifiers there. Not to exceed 10% of eligible entities' qualified economic development expenditures, and tax credit may not exceed $6 million per project. So another tax credit program. And the last one I have here on economic development was actually one of the first bills passed in the legislature. And because we were rolling out of the COVID era, employers were having a hard time hitting their benchmark to qualify for the 5-year Valorem manufactured exemptions. And so the legislature waived the payroll requirement for the tax year 2021, which is based on part of the 2020 calendar. The tax commission really helped out on this because they determined that there were, I think, 176 businesses that did not hit the threshold because of COVID issues. And so the legislature showed some grace in that area. It's possible this might be revisited next session, but we'll see how many businesses don't qualify next time. And they'll cross that bridge when they get to it. Okay, special session. This is a complicated topic that I've had to explain to a number of people. Right now, we're in 2 special sessions right now. The second and the third. The first special session occurred last November. And that was to meet and put together the redistricting lines for the legislature so that candidates could qualify for office at the appropriate time, which was filing last April. You have to live in the district so many months before you file, and so they had to meet last November to get all that straightened out. So that was special session number 1, and they've since sine died, and that was a one-issue deal. The legislature actually created special session number 2 on May 18th, and it's very odd occurrence, I should say, that the legislature creates their own special session, because it takes 75% of the legislature to agree. Usually it's the governor by executive order who does a special session. But special session number 2 was created by the legislature to deal with these 4 issues. Expenditure of federal funds pursuant to the American Rescue Plan of 2021. So the legislature basically took over the authority from the governor to expend the ARPA funds. So before that, the governor was in charge and was going to be the last person to be able to say yes or no on it. So they took that from the governor. They will also be expendituring the federal funds pursuant to the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act. I think, Gerald, this is what we had talked about yesterday. I knew I had it somewhere in the slide. Was that the other account you were thinking of?
We certainly need help with infrastructure.
Okay, well, that's another pot of money that they'll, whatever is in there. And then matters related to the provisions of the LEAD Act, which is Project Ocean. I actually had some questions about this and why that was in a special session call. The reason is, if the company makes a decision later this summer or year that they're coming to Oklahoma, they may need to do some cleanup in that category. No changing of incentive plan or anything like that. But if they don't come, then they're going to take that money and park it into another account, like the rainy day fund or something like that. So that's what that's all about. And then the last one is matters related to critical statewide economic development. This is where the guideline for the PREP fund, the $250 million for industrial parks and things of that nature that was created, this is where the guidelines are going to be created in special session number 2. So we're going to see guidelines on that hopefully later this summer. And this was taken right off of their call for the special session. Special session number 3 was the governor's executive order. Towards the end of session in May, there was a disagreement. He wasn't involved in the budget like he wanted to be. He had some line item vetoes. And then he said, and I'm calling back the legislature into special session to handle these 2 issues: abolish, reduce, or phase out the state's grocery sales tax, and to reduce the state personal income tax. He wanted a tax reduction package. And it's a great ask. We're flush with money. Where's the tax relief? And so that was a good ask on his part. So what's really odd about all of this is we have 2 special sessions going on right now at the same time. I don't know that I've ever seen that. It might be the last time I see it. I don't know. It might happen again soon, but it's the first time I think I've seen that.
Isn't the House, according to the newspaper, the House is done with the 3rd special session? Is
Correct.
that right? Or
Okay, you're reading ahead.
Oh.
Yes, you're correct. So the 3rd special session on grocery sales tax, which we're interested in, on what they do with that. There were 22 bills filed, and they had a buffet of grocery sales tax. They were either going to make it permanent or temporary. They were going to either, that's a personal income tax, permanent or temporary, either 1/4% or 0.5% reduction. So when you crisscross those, you'll end up with 4 bills easily in every category. Grocery sales tax, they filed legislation that was permanent or temporary, whatever categories, with restrictions or no restrictions on local changes, which we're very interested in as a city. And of course, OML took a quick stance on, hey, no restrictions, which basically doesn't allow cities to maybe take on some of the grocery sales tax that the state has been abandoning, or, and I should have opened that up before I came here, but whatever those restrictions are. But right away, you crisscross that, you end up with another 4 bills. The other bills were corporate income tax reduction, franchise tax reduction. They even filed a bill to reduce the governor's budget for his office, which I thought was kind of interesting, funny. Nevertheless, the House met, and the House actually passed this list of bills right here. And by the way, the XXX on the bill number is, an X designates that it's a special session bill. And this is the third special session. So that's why you have 3 X's. If you see 2 X's, it will be the second special session. And if there's 1 X, that would have been the redistricting bills. That was the first special session. So that's how you're able to determine how that all operates. So what was interesting about this was the House passed this list of bills right here out of the 22. This is what they passed. A few on grocery, a few on personal income tax. Again, a buffet. They reduced the funding for the Healthcare Authority, and I think that was due to the Healthcare Authority maxed out on federal funds, and they were just taking back. They just wanted to make sure they had ample money for those federal funds for the matching, and they were pulling some of that money back. Nevertheless, they passed a laundry list of bills, and on the same day, they sine-died and sent all these bills to the Senate. The Senate then came back and said, wait a minute, you sine-died, we can't pass these bills. And then the legal counsel in the House said, no, we can sine-die. Our desk is still open. So there's a little bit of a legalese argument behind the scenes. Of course, the Senate is still open on their special session, but from what I'm hearing, nobody has a real appetite to deal with the governor's special session. I hate to put that prediction out there, but that's what I'm feeling right now, and other colleagues are saying the same thing. You never know; they may do something when they come back. So this little political battle may go on here for a little while longer. Okay, Valorem tax protest. And any questions on special session? No? Okay. Valorem tax protest. I know cities don't participate in Valorem, but it was kind of starting to potentially affect economic development. For the last 15 years plus, there has been increasing court cases on businesses challenging their ad valorem taxes, mainly large businesses. It kind of was a thing in the wind industry when they would go from centrally assessed during the 5-year abatement period, and then all of a sudden they're locally assessed, the value goes up, and then they challenge it, and then it was an issue that was starting to develop. I've gone to tons of meetings over the last 15 years on this topic. The last interim study I went to last fall, the room was packed. Wind was a minority. Oil and gas was everywhere in the room. Other businesses were everywhere in the room. And all the fingers were pointing to a third-party contractor that was stirring up the ad valorem protest by coming in, consulting with counties, inflating the tax bill, and companies were protesting and going to court. And it's been a multi-year problem with no solution. This year they found a couple solutions. The first one was House Bill 3901. It basically takes anything over $3 million on the cash value, let's see, assessed fair cash value of over $3 million, takes it to a state tax court and not the local district court in the same courthouse where the taxes are assessed. So everybody thought that was a pretty good move. And the courts agreed, but they made sure they got the funding to take on the extra load because it's going to be an extra load. I thought that was a good solution. We'll see how that works. The second solution, and I underlined the most important part of the bill, is to keep the third-party appraisers, the consultants, out of the negotiation process, because a lot of assessors were just pointing over to the third-party consultant and say, they're going to work out the tax bill. And it was creating a lot of angst because the values were high, the businesses disagreed, then they would go to court, and the same consultant was incentivized to go to court and negotiate on behalf and represent the county assessor. So they were getting paid more if they went to court. So it became controversial. So those were two of the biggest bills I saw pass. In fact, the second one failed. The second bill failed the House the first time it ran through. And then they did a reconsideration, and it passed by a couple votes on reconsideration a couple days later. So that was historic, I thought. Hydrogen, I'll just roll through these. Hydrogen is going to be the next fuel source out there. I mean, we saw it with wind a decade ago. Here it is. Hydrogen is on the way. EV, as you can tell, is on the way. So a lot of different incentives out there. Gross weight exemption, hydrogen semis weigh a little bit heavier than a normal diesel semi. Payload's going to be less, so they did a little bit of a weight exemption, and hopefully technology brings that weight down. This bill here permits Career Tech to establish courses on hydrogen in cooperation with commerce and labor. This bill here excludes hydrogen storage tanks from the provisions of the Petroleum Storage Tank Consolidation Act. It's more of a pressure vessel, not a fuel storage tank like diesel or other fuel sources. 1352 prohibits, this is a preemption issue, but I think that a lot of cities kind of understand what they're trying to do here, but it prohibits municipalities from passing ordinances which limit consumer access to an energy source. Hydrogen. Let's see, 1852, adjust the membership of the Energy Initiative. This is basically an extension of the task force and making it, get them involved again, because there's going to be more hydrogen issues again next year. 1853 declares that the state will set a hydrogen fuel production standard as an annual goal. We did this with wind several years ago. It worked. We far exceeded the wind goal that was set years ago, and so this is kind of a standard approach to a new fuel source. Grants the Department of Labor authority to inspect hydrogen fueling stations and pumps. The reason Department of Labor is involved in this is because traditionally they inspect pressure vessels. It's Corporation Commission that does your inspections at the fuel pumps, but they've done pressure vessels for decades. And the last one basically puts your hydrogen vehicles on gives them a tax credit. You already have the same tax credit for EV and natural gas, so they put those vehicles on the tax credit list. Okay, ARPA. This is kind of an important topic for us. Oklahoma right now ranks 40th in the nation for spending the federal relief funds. That's why the legislature all of a sudden grabbed hold of that and said, okay, we got this. We need to start pushing this money out. And right before session started, they created this joint committee on pandemic relief funding, made up of House and Senate members, co-chairs. They have these four subcommittees for the Joint Committee on Pandemic Relief: Economic Development, Government Transformation, Health and Human Services, and Transportation, Infrastructure, and Rural. The legislature has, they have $1.87 billion at their disposal to get out there for investment into the state. The funds must be allocated by December 24 and used by December 25. So now with this new plan, the legislature is going to be assigning all of the projects. This is taken right off the state website. And the list has been shut off, but now there are 1,439 applications for the ARPA funds. City of Enid has 2 of those applications, correct? And we have 1.7 billion at our disposal, but there are $17 billion worth of requests, 10 times the amount. And if you look there at the smaller print, you can see that municipal government had the most applications with 454, and municipal government was kind of in the middle here at 2.6 billion in requests. So there's going to be a lot of cities that don't hit their mark. But if you add small business and large business together, that's a pretty big number. If you add your nonprofits together, so it's kind of not a good reflection right there on that chart. But the point of this is it's going to be competitive. So the legislature, they're going to take all of those projects and assign them to those 4 committees. So that's going to be a mystery until that happens. And those 4 committees are going to be, there's already a system in place to make sure the projects qualify. So the legislature doesn't have to do that. That's a third-party contractor that's doing that. And they're just going to start scouring this list for good projects. And so it's going to be incumbent on us to get in front of those co-chairs of those committees and a few of those legislators on the committees. We also need to let our local legislators know the details of what we're trying to do with our projects. So it's going to be very competitive. Just in the last 2 weeks, I've watched this work. 2 weeks ago, the legislature had their subcommittees meet, and they passed out these next 2 slides of projects, healthcare, nursing workforce, and started allocating this money out to these different projects. And then they went to the full committee, passed them out, and they don't pass them out as bills at that point, they pass them out as proposals. And once they pass the 2 committees, then they put it in bill format, and then they're going to pass it out in session number 2, which was created by the legislature to deal with ARPA funds. So that's the process that they're going to be using. Nonprofits, there's going to be a nonprofit organization that disperses that $25 million out. They're taking $500,000 and starting up the broadband office, which is a new creation. There's going to be a big pile of broadband money hitting the state soon. There's a goal to get 95% of the state hooked up to good broadband. We're not there yet. So, any questions on ARPA? I mean, they're gonna continue to meet the rest of the year. They are going to probably meet in special session number 2, I'm hearing in July, get the primaries over with, probably meet before the runoffs, and once the runoffs happen, then they'll start meeting probably more on a regular basis, right during the campaigns and all that, trying to get the ARPA funds out. It's gonna be a very busy year. And this process is going to go on probably for 1.5 years. So they're not going to do it all at once. So they
I
got
do
a little
have a
time.
question.
Yeah.
What determines which cities will get these funds allocated to them first?
That is a $1.8 billion question. Going up back on that one slide, there was like $2.4 billion in requests from cities. So I don't know. It's going to be at the pleasure of the committee chairs and the committee members as to how they decide that. I can't imagine a scenario where a city would get 100% of what they asked for. I think it would be rare. So we're going to have to figure that out quickly. Okay, interim studies. The end of this week, interim study requests have to be in on both the House and Senate. The Senate deadline to approve will be July 1, so they're going to get their list out pretty quick. House deadline to approve, you'll see their approved list at the end of July. Interim studies on top of all this. Usually during campaign year, it's not as many. Senate, I'll go through some election stats here real quick, and this will be about it. This year, half the Senate is up, and it's all your even number districts. So our local Senate district is Senate District 19, so that's not up this year. It's only this even number. So there's 24 Senate seats eligible. 4 have termed out this year, and the names are right there. There are a couple senators that did not seek re-election for various reasons. They get out early like I did. So you already guaranteed 6 brand new senators right there. 15 total Senate races this year when you count the new ones, and then there's challenger races going on. 8 Senate races will be decided in the primary. 7 of those are Republican primaries, 1 Democrat primary where a Republican didn't file, or, Democrats didn't file in the other ones. And then 7 races will go to the general election. Just fun stats. House of Representatives, here's your list of term-limited legislators this year. We don't have any locals on that list. Representatives who did not seek re-election for various reasons. Again, we don't have any locals on that list. But right there's an easy 11, if my count is right, that 11 House members that will be brand new. So between the House and Senate, you're guaranteed at least a 10% turnover. I've seen it as high as 30. State House elections, there are 56 House races this year. Every House member is up for re-election, but 45 of those were uncontested, so 56 House races this year. 21 House races will be decided in the primary next week. 20 of those are Republican primaries, 1 Democrat primary, and 35 races will go to the general election. So those are kind of fun stats in that category. The last slide, primary election next week. Don't forget to vote. I know every one of you will, as you have appreciation for elections. Runoff is in August and general in November. I covered a lot, but I think ARPA is our big project right now. Any questions?
Thank you.
All right.
The next item is 3.2, which is an update on the soccer complex transportation improvements. And Jason?
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm going to go over a brief presentation over kind of what the city has done, what we've done together, and then Mike with ESA is going to go over kind of the other portion of the project that's out there.
I think it's important to note it's a public-private partnership that started probably 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a while, and I think it's a $15 million plus project now. So it's going to be significant for the city, and I realize there's other needs that we'll probably talk about tonight too. But this is something that I think the city has done well in conjunction with the Enid Sports Association and certainly the philanthropy of the Allen family and the McLaughlins and everybody else that's donated. So if you haven't been out there in a while, it's starting to shape up like a real soccer park. So.
This slide's kind of hard to read, but I just wanted to illustrate to everyone. The red portions there are portions that have been constructed and completed. The blue portions there are portions that the city has awarded the funds. The funds are available. The construction's just not done yet. And then the green areas that are highlighted there are areas that are on tonight's change order that we will be encumbering tonight. The totals on that, the work completed, is about $3.6 million. The work that is remaining that we have encumbered is about $75,000. And then the change order tonight is about $560,000. I wanted to show this. I put this together. I just thought this was really cool. So in 2018, the year that I started working at the city, this is the aerial of that intersection. In 2020, the grading portion of the project was fully underway, and a lot of work was being done, but it didn't look like anything was happening. And so then here in 2022, this is actually from March. Correct, Raleigh? This is the aerial from March, and I was telling Mike when I saw him today, I wish we had an aerial from today, because the work that's been done in the last 6 months is amazing. As you can tell, we've got the main entrance up there in the northeast corner up there that's done. We've got the main entrance, the secondary entrance, I should say, to the middle of the field is all done, and then the parking on both sides. I say both sides. 3 sides is completely done, and then the gravel drive that's along the back side for bus parking and other parking, additional parking is done. The city has also completed the majority of the drainage work. We've got some finalization stuff to be done as we complete some downstream work. Once it gets completed, we'll come back up and wrap those up. The change order tonight is addressing these 4 areas, which is the emergency access, path, which is it's going to be a 20-foot wide road grade sidewalk, basically, to say, for emergency vehicles and service vehicles to bring product and other things into the soccer complex. And then also we got the two sidewalks that will go on the other side of the center walk, and then the east side sidewalks as well. With that, that's all that I had to talk about, but I know Mike Thinke with ESA has a lot of cool slides. I kind of did a sneak peek of them earlier, and it's pretty cool.
Thank you. I appreciate being here today and you having me, kind of walk you through where we're at, show you some slides. We also wanted to bring our drone film today, but we've been unable to get it up basically because of the wind. So the last 2 days when we didn't have it here, we didn't have any wind. Figures. A couple short clips first. Thank you. I've been with this project since 2017. I'm one of the founding board members. It's nice to finally see it get to this stage. Playground area you're looking off to the south there. These are from the second floor. The red dirt, that's where the championship field's gonna sit. That'll be the last thing that goes in. We're building, obviously, from the east side out.
So there are 7 fields?
Yes, 6 grass, 1 turf. And then there's 3 practice fields, which we'll touch base upon.
And have they been grown yet? Or has the
Yeah,
grass
they
been
will
grown for this?
actually have somewhere close to 20 months of no play on them, which is remarkable. I mean, they're pristine. Yeah.
And with these, is that amount of fields and practice fields sufficient to bring national tournaments to Enid to play at that complex only?
Especially since they're all lit, yes. In fact, we're applying for the national NJCAA D1 men and women's championship, which is 16 teams on each, so 32 total teams a week long. We already host the Region 3, which we are able to do at the high school with their help. That'll move out there also. But yes, we do. And the main reason is the lights. It allows us to play later, obviously. So
The 2 practice fields,
3.
they'll be sufficient, or 3? You said 3 now?
yeah, there's 3. If I said 2, I'm sorry.
So there's 5 fields and 3 practice fields?
No. There's 6 natural grass fields. There's 1 turf field. Those are full size. Those are 120 by 75s. Then there are 3 what we call practice fields. And in the presentation, you'll see them. Yeah, and they're all turf.
Okay.
So there's really about 10 fields, it sounds like.
Yeah, but
3 of them are
yeah.
smaller practice fields.
Yeah, let me roll through it. Now, the practice fields will make more sense because we actually size them for U8 and down, because they're the ones that tear your goal boxes up. And I'll explain that further. I always start with a few fun facts. This will just take a second. A soccer field is called a pitch. Most people probably know why. They think they do. It's because they pitch out from the center a couple of degrees so the water runs. But up until modern times, actually they pitched in one direction. So at halftime, so somebody wasn't running uphill 2 to 3 degrees all game. They went the other way. A wide receiver will average 1 to 1.5 miles a game in running. Basketball player, about 2.5. A high school varsity soccer player, a collegiate player, and a pro player. If somebody plays like what's known as the winger, like our youngest son, he will track somewhere between 8 and 9 miles a game. It's an incredible amount of running. Early soccer goals were wicker baskets, and the game was called basketball. Just useless facts. It's kind of fun. Okay, the playground, which you saw there and sits to the south of the field house. Safe for young siblings. It's very close to where the indoor bathrooms are, so it's easy to get your kids in and out of there. It has free public use. Barring a few unique situations like a national championship tournament or a national or a state club tournament, the complex is open. You can literally get within 100 yards of the walkway, less than that, on the trail system. If you wanted to do that, come in, go through the main gates, which are on the east side, go in, hang out at the playground with your grandkids or your children. There's no charge for any of that. It's all open. It is turfed, by the way. The playground will also be completely turfed with turf that's made for playgrounds. Just kind of another little sketchy picture there. Probably broke this. There we go. Practice fields. One of the things that makes us unique in most any place else, unless you're going to like Stryker up in Wichita, which is a huge complex, unless you're competing, and that's not who we're after. I mean, sure, we're going to pull some Wichita teams down, but that's not who we're catering to when we talk about day-to-day play and so on and so forth. We have these 3 practice fields. They are set, the inside lines are set for youth 8 and down. So if your child is playing in a tournament, U8, U7, U6, U5, down to U4, they're going to play on turf. When they're not on, then that's when high school teams, and being an assistant volunteer coach for 5 years at Enid High, just trying to find a place to warm up at certain places is incredibly tough. You've got a place to warm up. Fits well. This will all be taken to grade, so you don't have to worry. Nobody's going to be stepping off anything there. 3v3 fields, something that will drive revenue also, and you'll see when we get down on the revenue drivers, we have the Sweat Fest mentioned. A 3v3, those are called small-sided games in soccer. They only last maybe 20 minutes. It's 3 people against 3 people. We can hold those on these at the same time. Probably the only people that would have small-sided games on turf in the state. Great warm-up areas. There's another picture of one of them. Again, if you look back and you see the retaining wall, that will actually be graded up at a slight slant, so you can sit a chair there and or you can put a blanket down and watch your little ones play. So the parents are relatively close to the fields. And we did that around all 3 of them. So there's ample, easy seating. That's just kind of an aerial of the original drawing. Some of that has changed, and you'll see it as we go through. But you see the field house, which is 25,000 square feet. Indoors, it has about a 15,000 futsal court. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little later, that we can use during the entire year to drive revenue and train on. Just shows the full-size fields. We have something else that we're doing that you don't see at a club type of location. We have actual portable stands at every one of the grass fields. So there's 2 60-seaters. You can get a few more people in than that. The compound is, or the complex is fenced completely. We have, as I said, the natural grass fields. We did something else. We've got portable scoreboards. So if, no matter what your sport is, you probably have been frustrated from time to time, not understanding what the score is, where the game's at time-wise, how much time, so on and so forth. We've got portable scoreboards that are manned by the refs. They keep time, they stop it, they put the ad on, so on and so forth. They're at those. Portable seating allowed, lighting on all fields I mentioned, size fits, flag football, archery, lacrosse. Again, these fields are set for 120 by 75. One of the unique things about soccer is there is no set size, there's a range. So we could take these up to 125 by 80 if we wanted to, and they'd still be playable. We could go down to 110, maybe 100 by 60, and they'd still be varsity playable. And that's the way soccer is across the board on all your different size fields, littler kids fields on up. We have that ability here because we have 20-foot runoffs around each of them. This is our newest thing, and thank you, Enid Soccer Club, if any of the members are here tonight. They're partnering us to own a turf tank. A turf tank runs off a GPS, and it will go in and mark the field in about 32 minutes, a soccer field, versus 2 individuals, 2.5 hours each to mark a soccer field. So we've got this inked. We plan to use it. We're going to hopefully work with the school, the EPS, and mark some of their fields for them also. It does all kinds of sports. It's a unique, very unique item, and will save us manpower and money in the long range. You can set like right now, that line is actually set for a practice field. It's not as wide as you would have if we had a game on the field. So there's a lot of unique things to them. They've been around about 5-6 years. We did a lot of research on them. Really excited about them. These showed the lights on the ground. If you went out there tonight, all the lights are up except the double stacks. Those are the only ones left. They were able to get all the others up. I suggest if you get a chance the next day or two, drive by. Because things are really, really starting to happen there. The championship field seats about 1,800. It is fenced separately. There's temporary seating options. We can roll those other seats if we need them. We can roll them there. Press box is state-of-the-art, copied Selby's in many respects. There's streaming capabilities, so we can stream the games. A scoreboard area that's also an award area. There's actually 2 scoreboards, one that sits in the south or the northeast corner, and then another directly under the press box, so you can see from any place off the field. Half-line entrance. This is really unique. I don't know how many of you are soccer fans, but when you watch the pros, particularly in Europe, come out, they walk out of the center of their stadium with the little kids, and they carry the ball, and the ref walks in front of them. Well, you can leave our clubhouse, field house, your locker rooms, and go through those right at the center and enter that way also. Just a little catchy add-on. We needed the gate anyway to be able to get field equipment on there. That just shows kind of rectangle outline on where the championship field is. By the way, I'll mention that the turf is the same turf that the Dallas Cowboys use, and it was the same turf that the last Super Bowl was played on. We have 3 different types of turf in the complex. We have that turf, which matches the turf on the practice fields, which if you've got a kid that's 7, you can tell them that they're playing on a Dallas Cowboy turf field, and they'll get, I think they'll enjoy that. Those match. The playground turf is a tougher type turf. And then, of course, we have the turf for the futsal field inside, which is made for futsal. Here we go. That was shot just a day or 2 ago. It's where the championship field will be, 150 truckloads of dirt. East entryway doesn't look quite like this. There's no flags. We have 5 entryways into the complex, but the main one, of course, is on the east side. Have the grass area, bricks and brass plaques are on it. This next one will give you a kind of an idea. The photo that's on my left, you can see the 2 larger walls in red. That's where the brass plaques with the names of the donors will be. The little curved structure will say Advanced Soccer Complex. And then you walk down through that way, and as you go that way, you'll see a retaining wall there also. That'll be backfilled. That's right in front of one of the practice fields. But as you go that way, you'll come across a curving 70-foot fountain that is 2 layers. It drips from the top to the next and then down and then recycles. And because it's curving, we've got seating, a seating wall there where somebody could come and just relax and enjoy the fountain if they wanted to. Lots of landscape in this thing, 250 trees alone. Yep, fountain area, 250 trees. We seat around 408 cars. It's either 15 or 17 bus parking. Outside accessible bathrooms, so you don't have to go into the clubhouse, the field house to do that. This is an inside shot of a meeting room that'll seat about 60 that's inside the field house. And there they were unloading our building, which they started work on last night at 10 o'clock at night. So you'll start seeing, if you go out there now, you drive by are these pictures, all you're seeing the inside walls. I must be doing something wrong. There we go. Okay, I'm going to skip the futsal because I'll bring back to that because that's a term that's probably unknown by a lot of people. Obviously, the clubhouse will have concessions. We're working with a group called Got Soccer and Got Sport. You'll be able to actually order your concessions online before you get there. We'll have them ready for you. You'll prepay, get a small discount. They'll be ready for you to go. 4 locker rooms, 2 large ones for home. We're hoping, and no, there's not been anything said or done, but just brief conversation. We're hoping that there will be a college that NOC at some point will have its men and women team here. The locker rooms, the high school's moved, or will be moving and playing over here. They'll be practicing over here. Our middle school will play over here. There's a separate coaches room with lavatory and shower. There's separate referees room, lavatories and showers. There's a trainer's room, which is big on the college circuit. They have their own trainer's room and the high school circuit. The meeting room, which seats about 60, IT room, directors and ESC offices. The second floor is being built to have a second floor at some point. And at this point, we'll open and operate without. We'll see how things go. But at some point, we'd like to put a weight room up there, and it's structurally been built sound enough to do that, and maybe some offices. I personally would love to see the west side overlooking the championship field glass. That would be similar to what Stryker and the one in Tulsa is. Outdoor and indoor TVs. If you were looking at the field house, on the bathrooms, which sit on the southwest corner, that wall on the outside is flat. There'll be 6 outdoor televisions there, and you can put your brackets up. Plus, you'll be able to see the games that are playing on the championship field, because that'll use Huddle, which is a technology service that's used by almost every high school and college around. But we'll use the Huddle service, and then on the 2 flanking fields, we have permanent cameras also. So you'll be able to catch play on those. I can't see the date. Oh, wait a minute. I think the last one there is like March 3rd. You wouldn't recognize either of this building. That's about I go back, let me try guess. You would recognize the one on my right, because our building was 12 weeks late. Just got here 2 days ago, the structure for it. Otherwise, so that looks like basically where it's been. That's looking from further from the east onto it. That dirt area is the indoor futsal. What's futsal? Futsal is a game very similar to indoor soccer, where you use a smaller, heavier ball. We use it at training, as do most colleges and a lot of high schools now, to improve foot-eye coordination. You usually play 3v3, 4v4. Because the ball's heavier, you can't get it up really high. So it's used as a training, but there's also leagues. We plan to develop with the club 2 or 3 leagues: adult leagues, futsal, and then children and kids leagues, futsal. And we'll continue to use it in the winter, and the high school will, when it's out there during its practices, if the weather's bad or not. For us, it's a revenue driver that allows us to make the complex something, literally 365 days a year. There's something you can do there. So that was important to us when we designed it. This building's 25,000 square feet. It started out at 6. We finally said enough. Economic impact, tournament traffic will bring in thousands. Fans a year, impacting hospitality. Youth impact, 1,000 kids in Enid play soccer. The next slide will give you a breakdown on that. At one point it was a little higher than that, and it's starting to build again. Enid's youth a chance to experience a state-of-the-art complex and support their healthy physical and emotional choices. We compare this to David Allen. If you know anything about the economic impact of David Allen, most of the projections that we have going out, and again, you go out 5 years, how can you really do that in this? But if you do, it almost doubles. If we've landed the tournaments we believe we can, it will almost double the David Allen impact. One thing about soccer that's unique is if you have a 100-team competitive tournament, each one of those teams is paying somewhere between $550 and $750 just to get in, just to be in the tournament. That doesn't include food, all the other stuff they want, things you can sell them, the families that come with them. So you can play a 100, 150 team tournament, and you'll drive over, God, I don't even know how much it is. Off the top of my head, I've looked so many numbers. But it's literally hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of revenue that drives into the economy. They are huge when they work. Player breakdown. Enid Middle School has about 100 players. Enid High School, we had about 140 actually last year, but around 125. The Y has 300 in their Little Kickers program. They're going to bring them out and see how it goes and let them play on our indoor turf on Saturday mornings. And Enid Soccer Club in its heyday was a little over 1,000. COVID really took it down almost to 400. They're back in that 700 range. With the new facility, we think that that'll sweep back up to 1,000 relatively quickly. Tournament plans. Enid Public Schools, being one of their ex-volunteer coaches, talking to the current coaches, there's interest in developing a tournament, a high school tournament here. They also have the Big 8 tournament. We would probably be able to land that with the new facility pretty easy. The middle school, there's talk of a tournament also. We definitely will work with EPS to see if we can't make those things happen. OSA, Oklahoma Soccer Association. They have the President and State Cups. They're already interested in coming out. We've had conversation with them. It may be 23 or 24 before we land them, but those are those larger 150, 200 team tournaments where you're getting top notch, and that's just competitive play. That's not including recreational team or academies. Soccer is kind of unique. There are all kinds of levels and different gadgets and co-ed and competitive and EPL. I mean, I could go on all day with all the addresses. 4x4 outdoor tournament, the Sweat Fest is already signed up with us. They'll adjust their schedule around when we need them. They'll probably hold 2 tournaments this year. That'll be about 100 teams. 75% of the teams last year when they played at the high school came out of Oklahoma City. So we're drawing in good revenue. They're very strong 3v3 area and 4v4. NJC Regional National Championship. We host the regional already. We're applying for the nationals. We think we have a very good chance for it. We want to apply for 5 to 10 years. They're telling us that we have to apply for 2, so we're just kind of in the middle of talking and finding things out. Club tournaments. That's a huge revenue driver, is your club tournaments. Our club has been unable to hold tournaments because of the facility they have now, which, by the way, we're going to allow them to use and help them with the turf tank to continue to use it as warm-up fields. And if we have an exceptionally large tournament, something way over the top, we can play extra games over there. But the club tournaments, they're looking at 2 a year. 4v4 indoor futsal tournaments already talked about, but they're all revenue drivers. And when we plug these in, they all play at different times. It's almost like a natural. Literally outside of a month or 2 in the summer, when you will hold college ID camps, you have tournaments going on. College ID camps have never been held here. Having 3 out of 5 of my kids played soccer, and our youngest was an honorable mention All-Stater. I've been to a ton of ID camps. We need one here. And a lot of the smaller colleges and community colleges in the Arkansas, Kansas, eastern Oklahoma area have told us they would love to see that, because when they go to an ID camp to see kids play, and ID camps is basically where Caleb would have paid, which means I would have paid, $450 to $800 for him to go for a week, and then he would have coaches that would watch him and help coach him. Well, if I'm playing up a Cali, I probably don't have a real good chance, and I really want this kid, against getting the kid that's going to play for Ohio State. So we want to tailor those to that and then build them. The futsal leagues will build out. That's not going to be a problem. Huge interest in it. Small-sided indoor league I've talked about a few times. YMCA Indoor Summer League. Flag football. Soccer fields are made for flag football. Perfect for them. You can adjust them. And by the way, that's what the turf tank can do. It can mark these fields all off. If you've got a child that's 14, they're not playing on a 120 by 75. They're playing on a smaller size field. We can remark those with different color paints, so on and so forth. We have been approached, and we want to continue conversations with the Y on their flag football, but we've been approached by a squad of over 1,000 players out of Edmond to hold 2 tournaments up here next year. They think that they can draw from different areas. We're very excited about seeing like that, and we're willing to work with anybody, but flag football is a natural. Community offerings, referee licensing courses. We have a real issue here. Right now they want to go get licensed. They have to go to Tulsa or Oklahoma City. I have talked to Autry Tech because they're doing some sports licensing right now, and there's a little bit of an interest there. I think there's a good interest that they might look at using our facility for soccer referee licensing. Coaches licensing. Soccer's the same way. Meeting room rental. They can use that, birthday parties, free entry, most events, scoreboards, portable scoreboards. We've touched upon that all. And I did want to close. We're proud to present the only roundabout in Northwest Oklahoma, we believe, is there. So, any questions?
So on this futsal, do they hit that ball with their head?
No, you wouldn't want to, and you can't. You probably can't. You can get it up that high, but it's pretty hard. It's a very heavy ball. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. The next item is an update on the EJRT from Grant Mason.
I hand you guys, got one for each of you. Pass them around.
Absolutely, thank you.
So my name's Grant Mason. I'd like to thank you guys for allowing us to come before you today and speak and give you an update on EJRT. I currently serve as the board president for EJRT. I'd like to start with just giving a few little facts about the league. We've been around about 35 years, as far as I can tell. It was incorporated in 1987. We currently have 3 sports: football, baseball, and softball. Baseball and softball both having spring and fall leagues, as well as a number of tournaments. Football has 7-on-7 in the summer, and they have a fall league as well. Our leagues start at the end of March and go through November, so we spend a lot of time out there at the fields. We've got about 1,600 participants every year and growing. We're hosting 1,300 to 1,400 games per year for those 3 sports, and that's not including tournaments. So what brought us here tonight? Well, it started with maintenance issues that we've had for a number of years, and I'm hoping that leads to a larger conversation. It's not my intention to throw stones at anybody. I know the city of Enid gets stretched thin on their parks department, the help they have to come out and work on our fields. But I'd like to touch on a few of these maintenance issues. There's a whole laundry list that you guys can read through, and then I'd ask Kenyon Hughes to stand up and speak. He's the director of our baseball program. He can speak more in depth. I've got several board members here, 2 of our athletic directors, and a number of parents. So I'd like to start out with the light issue at the baseball complex. We're waiting months and months for these things to be fixed. We had 23 lights out at one point. Around 23 lights out at one point. Some of them have been fixed, not all of them. Another one that I'd like to focus on are the lips around the infield areas throughout most of the complex. These are creating safety issues. It allows for ground balls that have no path, that has no consistent path. You don't know what it's going to do. You're going to hurt kids. The next thing is septic issues. We had our preseason tournament, had to call out the city of Enid with every field being played on, and they had to bring in their big pump truck because the septic tank was not drained before at the start of the season. We had standing sewage in the middle of the tournament. I don't know how many of you have little kids, but they like to play in water. So we have several ADA compliance issues that have been brought up a number of times that have not been rectified. The backstops on the majority of the fields, they're curling up. They need replaced. They need some money put towards it. Obviously, you see a bunch more through here. Lack of parking is always an issue, but I think most people have to deal with that, most complexes. Move on to softball. You can see some of the pictures in your packets, the lips that we're talking about, the usage, just worn out fields. So on softball, the ones I'd like to focus on first and foremost are the lack of bathrooms at Crossland South for our girls, our softball girls. As far as I can tell, there was $400,000 that originally was going to be put towards concession stand and a permanent bathroom that is now going to lights at Kellett Park, which I have no issue with putting money into Kellett Park, but I would ask you guys, is that the field that's getting the most use? I would say probably not. We have no shade at Crossland anywhere. That's been a big gripe from out-of-town teams that come into these tournaments is there's no relief. You know, they have to go sit out in their cars, turn on their car, and because they can't catch any shade. The stands that were placed at the newer softball complex at Crossland, they brought in those stands from the skate parks, which had the safety rails removed. We've been asking for those to be reinstalled. They are not. We had a kid fall, hit his head. He's fine, but more safety issues. You can go through the pictures through the softball complex and see some more safety issues, some other smaller issues. Football, we had to wait months, over a year, to have scoreboards installed. This has been completed. The fields that we have out at Government Springs are 2 fields, and they're in poor shape. They, at very least, they need to be leveled. It's kind of embarrassing to look at. Another issue we have with football as well as softball is it's across town. The majority of our complex that we deal with is at Crossland, and the rest of them are at Government Springs. Softball, they're limited on how many teams they can bring in because their resources are stretched across town. You have parents that have multiple kids in leagues, and some are playing here and some are playing across town. Well, that's tough on single parents. So one other issue we had just recently was our concession stand. One of our concession stands at the baseball field, electrical outlet started sparking, ruined a couple pieces of equipment. We're working on that. So what I would like to move on to, all these maintenance issues have been recurring. They've been ongoing for decades, and we're putting Band-Aids on them. We're not solving the bigger issue. So my second point is here, in here is what I titled missed opportunities. So we're limited on the size of tournaments we can play due to facilities being spread out, lack of field maintenance, just poor field conditions overall. We have so much wear and tear. 1,400 games in a complex is a lot. And we're putting no money back into that. We're receiving no money as an organization. We're not allowed to work on these fields. That right was taken away from EGRT a number of years ago. That was before me. So I spend a lot of time in western Oklahoma at some of these smaller towns. I know a lot of people. I've asked why they're not in Enid playing their sports tournaments. They said, well, your facilities are horrible. We can go to Elk City, we can go to Tonkwall, we can go to Kingfisher, Hennessy, and all those facilities are better. We're leaving money on the table. We're leaving tax revenue on the table. I know that you guys have had some frustrations with the Glow Hotel and occupancy rates. Well, this brings me to our wood bat tournament we had a couple weeks ago, and this is just one example of many. I believe there were 9 out-of-town teams that weekend. They booked 15 hotel rooms at $180 a night for 2 nights. They ate dinner on Friday. They had 3 meals on Saturday and 3 meals on Sunday. I don't know how many of them went to Academy and Hibbett and Walmart and everywhere else. And I'm guessing when you live in Guyman, you had to buy a lot of fuel before you left. So there's another way to put more people in those hotel rooms, but moving money there instead of investing it in our facilities is not going to help. You're just going to keep pouring money into these hotels that are not generating occupancy. And one of my most concerning things in this section is we have Enid parents that are taking their kids on weekends. They're opting out of our tournaments to go play in these other tournaments in these small towns because the experience is better. And I can say I don't blame them. I'll have to look at that pretty hard with my children. I put a couple news articles in your folders that you can read whenever you have some time, just talking about the importance of youth sports and the economic impact that it generates, which you heard from the last presentation. Next is the relationship between EJRT, City of Enid, and Enid Public Schools. This is a triad. It was formed that way, and over a number of years, it's really just became this organization, the EJRT organization. We get little input, little help, we feel like, from the City of Enid and from Enid Public Schools. I would ask you guys, what can we do to improve that communication, improve that relationship? So if you guys have any recommendations, we're all ears. I have a few of my own that I have on the next page. So I'll go ahead and go to the next page. I understand that this is a tall order, what I'm about to ask for, and I understand the expense. There's been 30 years, Crossland's been out there roughly, give or take, and virtually no capital improvements made. The softball fields, the 2 softball fields were installed. That's great. It's not enough. The only other capital improvements that I'm aware of since I've been involved are about $40,000 worth of scoreboards, which were paid for by EJRT and donations, and some fencing that EJRT also paid for, as well as a batting cage at the softball complex that EJRT also paid for. Since I've been involved, we've received no dollars from the City of Enid or Enid Public Schools. And for the most part, we get along okay, other than our lack of facilities. So what am I asking for? Obviously, an improved maintenance schedule. We've got to work together to get something figured out. We need more people there working constantly. We would like a parks employee specifically designated to EJRT for the EJRT use facilities and reports to the EJRT board. The majority of the park usage is Crossland Park. And maybe you guys have some data that would say otherwise, but I've never seen anything. And I find it hard to believe that that's not the most usage of any public park in the City of Enid. We would also like priority use over fields at Crossland and Government Springs. That was taken away a number of years ago, and we can't even put signs on the gates that say no outside food or drink, which really hurts with concessions. And we have no rights to the fields that we've invested money in. It's first come, first served, and that's tough. I would also like to see a member of City Council join our board as a non-voting member so we can improve that communication. That would be my fix in improving our relationship. Finally on this, we want to be able to have the right to determine when games are played and not played due to inclement weather. Ultimately, the City of Enid makes that determination. They're not out there. So, which moves me to the money side of it, capital improvements. First and foremost, we need bathrooms and concessions at that softball complex. Those little girls don't need to be using porta potties sharing with grown men. And just the smell that porta potties give off, we need a more professional, just a more respectable bathroom facility. We need shade put up throughout the entire complex. That's going to get somebody hurt one of these days in these hot summer nights. We need 2 more softball fields at least at Crossland because, like I said, we're limited on the size of tournaments that we can generate. We'd also like to see the football fields moved to Crossland. Here's the big ask. We'd like to turf the infields of all the baseball and softball fields The 2 T-ball fields that we have, we'd like the entire field turfed because those smaller fields, it's just easier to turf the entire thing from my understanding. We would like to turf new football fields if we can get them at Crossland. We would like lights at the T-ball field so we can play night games. Additional parking. Now, before I move on to the next part, I applaud the city of Enid for putting the $4.2 million into the soccer complex. That's a move in the right direction. I love to see it. It's beautiful. I love that they've invested money bringing in the College World Series. It's done very well. But in doing all those things, we forgot about one of the larger youth organizations in the state of Oklahoma, at very least Western Oklahoma. I know that that's a private-public partnership, and that is what I'm asking of you guys, is these are existing public parks, City of Enid parks. If there's not a commitment from the City of Enid, then I can't go raise funds. It's backwards from how the soccer complex did it, and that's okay. But if you guys are not on board, then we cannot get the rest of the public on board, and some of those very philanthropic people that are willing to help will not. So, which takes me to my last page, which is the preliminary quote I got from Target Sports Field Turf. This is a rough estimate because obviously they would have to do more in-depth measurements and some things, but this is a good place to start. 10 baseball fields and softball infields, 2 full T-ball fields, approximately 205,000 square feet. It's going to cost somewhere between $2.9 and $3.2 million. This price includes that company doing all the work. The cost of materials is about 40% of that price. 60% of that is the civil construction and deconstruction involved, which could obviously, you could lower that price quite a bit if the city of Enid would help. 2 football fields, about 85,000 square feet apiece, 170,000 square feet, somewhere between $1.5 and $1.7 million. The warranties on those fields, football fields is 8 years, baseball and softball infields are 5 years. You should get 10 plus years out of each field. Turf, obviously baseball and softball have much more intense use constantly in a smaller area, so they have to be replaced sooner. This would drastically reduce our maintenance needs because we're struggling to have maintenance performed on our current field, which has got us into this issue. Your hours of use are much higher. You know, so roughly to get everything turfed would be somewhere between $4.4 and $4.9 million for the turf. So in closing, like I say, if the city of Enid is not willing to help us, is not willing to make the commitment that allows us to go out into the public and raise dollars, then we don't stand a chance, and we will continue to have raw sewage in the middle of our tournaments. We can't bring in larger tournaments. The town of Muskogee hosts the baseball tournament with 72 teams that comes in. It's a lot of hotel rooms. We can't do that, but we have all the other amenities in the city of Enid other than the complex that ran by a proven league. 35 years, you don't do that if you're unsuccessful. So I close in saying I would love to work with you guys and try and figure out a way to improve these facilities. But at the end of the day, the ball's in your court. You guys are gonna have to determine if you can find some dollars to help us get rolling. So with that, if you guys have any questions, I'll answer them. If not, I'd like to have Kenyon Hughes come up and talk about the maintenance issues a little more in depth.
Come back at the meeting and talk.
Yeah, well, it's
That's right, yes, yes, yes. We're gonna adjourn and come back for the regular meeting in 4 minutes. Some of us need to go down the hall for a minute. You can come back at the regular meeting and then public comment and make your comments if you're willing to wait. So we are
Hey,
adjourned.
I just want to throw a couple things on here, and I know we're done. I've been over here trying to think of adjectives to describe this situation, and I've come up with two: embarrassing and unacceptable. It really is. My kid played out there 10 years ago, and those fields were bad then, and I know they're in worse shape now. We need to come up with probably a 3 to 5, 4 to 7 year plan to fix all this stuff. Those bathrooms are nasty. They're terrible, especially the ones in Government Springs, which I think have been shut down for a while. Unacceptable, guys and gals and public and everybody. This is not right. We need to start with restrooms, fields, and concessions. Government Springs, I think Grant made a good point. I think that's on its way out. We can probably move, I would love to look and see if there's any feasibility of moving some of those fields up north to Crossland Park and having everybody together instead of across town. These are just some ideas. I would be honored to be a board member for the EJRT if anybody wants me to go on there. If we don't address this, they're going away. They're going to get to the point where nobody's want to come to Enid. We're the biggest city in northwest Oklahoma, and for us to have baseball, softball, and football facilities that are this beat up is embarrassing. It really is. And we talk about putting money into youth programs. Well, here's a perfect example where we can put some money into this. I would really like to get together with Gerald and Scott, and we need to come up with a plan. And if we need to privately, publicly fund it, awesome. I will go out and help raise money for it. But it needs to be done.
We'll come back at 6:30.